My phone buzzed once, sharp and loud in the stillness, illuminating a notification that carved a cold line through my world. Callum Miller has removed you from the group, the Miller crew. Just moments before, I'd been trying to inject some spark into our too perfect life. Now the silence screamed a different truth. The smell of sawdust and fresh coffee was the scent of our Sundays. I'd be curled on the sofa, a book open in my lap, while my Callum, worked on one of his projects. That morning, it was a bookshelf, crafted from solid walnut, destined for the empty wall in our living room. He was an architectural engineer, but his real passion was woodworking. His hands, which could design skyscrapers, were impossibly gentle as they sanded the wood grain. His brow furrowed in the same focused way it did when he was trying to solve a complex equation. Callum's love was like the furniture he built, solid, functional, and meant to last a lifetime. There were no dramatic flourishes, just sturdy oak and perfect dovetail joints. At 30, he was a man of quiet, unwavering certainties. He was the kind of man who remembered the half-birthday of our cat, who preemptively stocked my favorite tea before my cycle, whose love was a steady, reassuring hum in the background of my life. For 2 years, this steadiness had been my anchor. Lately, though, it had started to feel like a cage. A beautiful, comfortable, handcrafted cage. I'd confessed this to my best friend Maya over brunch just last week. "It's too perfect, you know," I'd whispered, swirling the mimosa in my glass. "I feel like we're a settled old couple." "Where's the spark, the tension?" Maya had given me a look I couldn't quite decipher. "A little insecurity is like salt and ease," I'd argued, mostly to myself. "It brings out the flavor." Part of that perfect picture was his family. The Millers were a loud, loving, fiercely loyal clan who had absorbed me into their ranks with startling speed. I wasn't just Callum's girlfriend. I was the one his mom sent recipes to, the one his dad asked for tech advice. I was in the Miller crew on WhatsApp, a sacred digital space of baby photos, bad dad jokes, and Sunday dinner plans. I was in what I saw as traditional, even a little old-fashioned, was their core operating principle: loyalty. To them, respect wasn't just a nicety, it was the entire foundation. A foundation Callum, I now realize, had meticulously built our relationship upon. I just hadn't understood how little weight that foundation could bear. The party had been fun, a boisterous gathering at a friend's downtown loft. Someone, a friend of a friend who didn't know our history, had casually mentioned my ex, Mark. "Oh, you know Mark Jensen, the artist? Saw his new exhibit, it's wild stuff." The name hung in the air for a moment before the conversation drifted on, but it had planted a seed. Back in our quiet apartment, the lingering buzz of gin and tonic fizzed in my veins, mixing with a dangerous, competitive energy. The silence, usually a comfort, felt like a challenge. I watched Callum hang his coat, his movements as precise and deliberate as ever. This was it. This was the moment to inject a little chaos into his perfect order. I leaned against the cool granite of the kitchen island, adopting a pose I hoped looked more sophisticated than I felt. "You know, Callum," I began, my voice a little too bright. "I love you, I really do, but it's important for a girl to always keep her options open, to remember she has a choice." He turned from the closet and smiled, a tired but affectionate crinkle at the corners of his eyes. "Is that so, and what other options are you considering tonight? The leftover pizza in the fridge?" He thought I was joking. The condescension, however gentle, pricked my pride. I needed him to take me seriously. I needed to see a crack in that calm facade. "I'm serious," I said, my tone hardening. I pushed off the counter and walked closer, closing the space between us. "Take Mark, for example." I saw the smile falter just a little. It was enough. He was an absolute train wreck of a human being, I conceded, a strategic move to make what came next seem like an objective observation. A terrible boyfriend, but in one specific area. I let the sentence hang, enjoying the flicker of confusion in his eyes. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He knew how to make a woman feel, completely consumed. There was this raw, primal energy. He had this way of holding you down, not with anger, but with this incredible focus, like for that one moment, you were the only thing that existed in the universe. That kind of passion, it's a different language, you understand, don't you? I was being deliberately provocative, painting a vivid, intimate picture for him. I described a specific technique, a detail about his touch that was both carnal and humiliatingly specific to share. I watched his face, my heart thumping with a perverse thrill. I was waiting for the explosion. I wanted him to get angry, to grab my arms, to pin me against the wall and kiss me with a ferocity that would erase Mark's memory. I wanted him to fight for me, to prove he was better. I wanted a movie scene. I thought I was playing a game. I had no idea I was holding a lit match over a barrel of gasoline. The smile didn't just falter, it vanished. It was as if a light had been switched off behind his eyes, leaving only a flat, cold darkness I had never seen before. He didn't get angry. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't, as I had so foolishly fantasized, grab me. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity, his gaze level and unnervingly steady. The silence in the room was no longer comfortable or challenging. It was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air from my lungs. Finally, he gave a single, slow nod. I understand, he said. His voice was devoid of any emotion. It wasn't the voice of my partner, the man who whispered my name in his sleep. It was the voice of a stranger. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I watched, my own body frozen with a sudden, creeping dread. I thought he was going to retreat into scrolling, a passive-aggressive modern silent treatment. I could handle that, I could break that, but then my own phone, sitting on the counter beside me, buzzed once, sharp and loud in the stillness. I glanced down at the screen. The notification was stark and brutal. Callum Miller has removed you from the group, the Miller crew. My breath caught in my throat, it felt like a physical blow. Before I could even process the shock, I looked up and saw him. He had sat down on the sofa, the one we'd picked out together, and was staring at his screen with that same detached focus he gave his woodworking. His thumb was moving with a swift, methodical rhythm. Swiping, tapping, swiping, tapping. A cold realization washed over me. He was deleting our photos, every single one. The trip to Italy, the goofy Christmas selfies, the picture of us on the day we moved in, covered in paint and grinning like idiots. He was erasing our history, one digital piece at a time. When he was finished, he slipped the phone back into his pocket and stood up. He walked to the hall closet, took out his jacket and the keys to his truck. He didn't look at me. He didn't slam anything. The calm was the most terrifying part. It was the calm of a surgeon making a clean, final incision. He paused at the door, his hand on the knob. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he might turn, might say something to fix this. But he just looked at the doorframe, his voice flat and final. "Inez," he said, the name sounding foreign on his lips. "Your options have been exercised." The door clicked shut behind him, a quiet, definitive sound that echoed the snapping of my entire world. I stood there, cemented to the kitchen floor, listening to the sound of his truck's engine starting and then fading into the night. The silence he left behind was heavier, more profound than before. It pressed in on me, thick and suffocating. For a full minute, my mind was just white noise, a frantic scramble to catch up with a reality that had just accelerated past me at impossible speed. The sheer clinical efficiency of his departure was something my brain couldn't compute. Then the first wave hit me, not regret, not yet. It was a hot, indignant surge of disbelief. "For a stupid comment," I said aloud to the empty room, my voice sounding shrill and childish. "Is he insane? He's going to throw all of this away over one stupid, meaningless sentence?" I walked to the window and peered through the blinds, but his parking spot was already empty. The finality of it sent a fresh jolt of anger through me. The narrative began to spin in my head, a frantic effort to repaint myself as the victim. He was overreacting, he was punishing me. This was a wildly disproportionate response to a simple, if ill-advised, test. A test he had failed spectacularly. I snatched my phone, my fingers fumbling as I opened our message thread. "Callum, are you crazy? Come back right now." I hit send, a single gray checkmark appeared, delivered, not read. My thumb hovered, then typed again, faster and angrier this time. "This is ridiculous, it was a joke, you're being incredibly dramatic." Another gray checkmark, a monument to my unheard plea. I tried to call him, straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Callum, leave a message." The familiar, cheerful greeting felt like a personal attack. I tried again and again, each time the automated voice felt colder, more distant. My heart started to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I switched to WhatsApp, a last resort. His profile picture, a shot of us smiling on a hike, was gone. In its place was the default anonymous gray silhouette, last seen today at 11:42 p.m. The moment he walked out the door, he had blocked me everywhere. A cold knot of panic began to tighten in my stomach, but I pushed it down with fury. This was a power play, a dramatic, theatrical gesture to teach me a lesson. Fine, he could have his night. I paced the length of our living room, the polished floorboards cool beneath my bare feet. My monologue continued, a vicious cycle of justification. I wasn't attacking him. I was trying to provoke a reaction to get him to fight for our relationship. And what did he do? He tucked his tail and ran. It was weak. It proved my unspoken point. He lacked the very passion I was talking about. My eyes fell on the half-finished bookshelf, its pieces leaning against the wall where he'd left them. I ran my hand over the smooth, sanded walnut. It was cool and inert, lifeless. Just like him, I thought, a fresh wave of bitterness rising, all precision, no soul. I spent the next hour in a state of escalating digital desperation. I drafted a long, rambling email, a chaotic mix of accusations. "How could you be so fragile?" And hollow apologies. "I'm sorry you took it the wrong way." I'd type furiously, then delete it all in a fit of disgust. I checked our shared calendar, our cloud photo album, looking for any sign of activity, any digital pulse. Nothing. He had simply unplugged himself from me. Exhausted, I finally sank onto the sofa. I forced myself to take a deep breath. He'd cool off. He'd drive around for a bit, realize how absurd he was being, and come crawling back in the morning, sheepish and apologetic. I'd be magnanimous, of course. I'd forgive him for his little tantrum. Convinced of this invented future, I went to bed, deliberately leaving his side of the bed untouched, a silent invitation. I fell asleep rehearsing the speech I would give him, a speech about communication and emotional maturity, completely unaware that I was the only one who would ever hear it. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. His side of the bed was cold, pristine, and achingly empty. The panic from the night before returned, a sour taste in my mouth. The fortress of self-righteousness I'd built began to show cracks. He wasn't back. There was no apologetic text, no missed call. There was only the oppressive silence of a Sunday morning that was supposed to smell like sawdust and coffee. My hands trembled as I dialed Maya's number. I needed an ally. I needed someone to validate my outrage, to agree that Callum's behavior was that of a madman. He left Maya, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush before she could even say hello. He just walked out, packed nothing, just gone. I recounted the entire story, carefully editing it to cast myself in the most favorable light. I framed my comment as a modern feminist musing on relationship dynamics. I described his reaction as a silent, terrifyingly cold shutdown. He kicked me out of his family group chat. He deleted our photos over a asterisk conversation. Who does that? I finished, breathless and expecting a wave of sympathetic fury on my behalf. The line was quiet for a long moment. I could hear the faint sound of city traffic on her end. Inez, she finally said, and her voice was not sympathetic, it was weary. It was the voice of a friend who had been dreading this phone call for a very long time. What were you hoping to achieve? She asked, her tone clinical. I don't know. I wanted him to show some fire, to be jealous, to prove he cared. By telling him your ex was better in bed, Maya's voice was sharp now, cutting through my excuses. Let me get this straight. You were in your shared home, a place he built with you, a place that is supposed to be his sanctuary, and you decided to sexually compare him to another man. A man you yourself admit was a piece of trash. It wasn't like that, I started, but she cut me off. It was exactly like that. You didn't test him in ease. You publicly humiliated him in the most intimate way possible. You took his trust, his vulnerability, and you weaponized it to satisfy some cheap high school desire for drama. You didn't attack his ego, you attacked the very foundation of your relationship. What did you expect him to do? Thank you for the feedback. Beg you to stay while you held the memory of your ex over his head. Her words were like a bucket of ice water, shocking and brutally cold. Every excuse I had constructed withered under the glare of her logic. He loves me, I whispered, a pathetic defense. He did, Maya corrected gently. But love requires respect, Inez. You treated his respect like it was disposable. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It wasn't from Callum. It was from his younger sister, Chloe, who had, until last night, been one of my closest friends. We'd planned to go to a yoga class together next week. The message was short, a guillotine's blade. Inez, Callum told us what happened. Please don't contact him or anyone else in my family again. I wish you the best. I wish you the best. The polite, meaningless sign-off of a stranger, my stomach dropped. The system hasn't just crashed. It had been systematically and permanently dismantled. I wasn't just locked out of Callum's life, I was excommunicated from an entire family that had once called me their own. The full, terrifying scope of what I had done was finally starting to dawn on me. The week that followed was a masterclass in quiet horror. I existed in a state of suspended animation, trapped within the four walls of our apartment, which now felt less like a home and more like a museum of a dead relationship. Every object was an artifact, a testament to a life I had torched with my own words. The bookshelf Callum had been building stood in the living room, its pieces leaning against the wall in arrested development. I'd run my hand over the sanded walnut, feeling the faint, ghost-like warmth of his touch still embedded in the grain. I saw him everywhere. In the way the morning light hit the coffee machine he'd insisted on buying for my birthday. In the worn spot on the arm of the sofa where he always rested his elbow. In the faint scent of his cedarwood aftershave that still clung to the pillows on his side of the bed. My frantic anger had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing, hollow panic. The justifications I'd clung to now seemed laughably pathetic. I replayed the scene in my mind 100 times a day, each time with excruciating clarity. I saw the flick of his smile disappearing. I heard the dead, flat tone of his voice. I felt the finality in the click of the door. I wasn't testing him. Maya was right. I was humiliating him. I had taken the most secure, loving man I had ever known and deliberately targeted his sense of worth within our most intimate space. I hadn't been looking for passion. I had been looking for power. I wanted to prove that I held the cards, that I was the one with the options. I had treated his love not as a gift, but as a given, a safety net I could jump on for thrills, assuming it would always be there to catch me. The silence from his side was absolute. No angry emails, no drunken phone calls, no messages passed through mutual friends, just a clean, complete severance. It was this silence that screamed the loudest. It told me this wasn't a rash decision made in a moment of anger. This was a calculated execution of a final judgment. He hadn't just gotten angry, he had assessed the situation, found a fatal flaw in the foundation, and condemned the entire structure. I finally understood. I hadn't just crossed a line. I had nuked the entire landscape. My stupid, arrogant test hadn't just poked a bear, it had convinced the bear that its only path to survival was to burn down the entire forest. His calm wasn't a lack of passion, it was the chilling calm of a heart that had been stopped dead in its tracks. The man I knew, the man who loved me, had died in that kitchen. And I was the one who had killed him. Exactly 1 month after that night, I got a text from a mutual friend, Liam. It was hesitant, clearly uncomfortable. Hey, hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to let you know Callum's moving into a new place over in Northwood today, in case you needed to coordinate getting the last of your stuff. The message was a practical courtesy, but it felt like a final nail in the coffin. Northwood, a different part of the city, a new beginning. For him, I didn't think, I just grabbed my car keys. I drove with a hollow feeling in my chest, my mind a blank slate of desperation. I don't know what I intended to do, apologize, scream, beg, I just needed to see him, I needed one more chance to make him understand. I found the address, a modern apartment building on a tree-lined street. I parked across the road, my engine off, feeling like a private investigator at the scene of my own life's crime. And then I saw him. He was carrying a box out of a small moving truck, his father directing him from the sidewalk. His brother was there too, laughing as Callum nearly tripped over a stray curb. He looked thinner, the easy contentment gone from his face, but he was okay. He was functioning, he was moving on. As he turned to go back to the truck, his eyes swept across the street, and for a brief, heart-stopping second, they met mine through the windshield. There was a flicker of recognition, but nothing more. No anger, no pain, not even sadness. It was the polite, detached acknowledgement you would give a stranger whose face seems vaguely familiar. Then he simply turned back to his father, picked up another box, and walked into his new life, leaving me behind in the old one. In that single, dismissive glance, I understood everything. It was over irrevocably. He hadn't just moved apartments, he had moved on from the very idea of me. I had made myself so toxic that he'd had to amputate me from his life to survive. I drove home, the city lights blurring through my tears. I had used my options as a weapon, and in doing so, I had obliterated the only one that had ever mattered. Sitting alone in the apartment that was now only mine, a final, ugly thought wormed its way into my consciousness, a last vestige of the person I used to be. But he still overreacted. The thought was quiet, shameful, but it was there, and the fact that a part of me could still think that even after all this was the most damning proof of all. It was the proof that I deserved this silence, I deserved to be my only option left.